Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Monday. It's August 2nd. This will be our chart lesson for today, and we're starting a new month today. July's in the books. As we get into August and school starts to start back and things start to get back to normal for most families and they get through the summer school being out and so forth, things will start to probably pick up again. Today was actually some pretty good movement today. There's a couple of different ways to look at it. There's actually this tan two-tiered channel working lower, and you can clearly see the midline working through there. The problem is we just didn't come back to this trend line very often. It did give you a clue of where we were going to bounce down here at the lows. So, but honestly, I'm going to remove that, although it's valid. I'm going to remove that. And the way I played it was a range early. It's clearly all this support here. Then once we broke lower, look for a measured move on the range, which then we went into this tighter range with that exact measured move before we finally broke lower and moved on down. And this was the lows of the two-tiered channel that was working like down, and we bounced off of that. So I believe if you just played the range and used these trends and channels within that, you would have been better off and actually probably came out okay. So you can see that. We'll color this last one here as well. Just make it tan. So you can clearly see these short-term trends and channels that are playing within these ranges. Once we broke lower, it didn't take but just, I mean, we really had one tight channel all the way down to that measured move. And we tried to bounce out of there multiple times. Of course, we got some bounces, but prices never really took off. Never even got back to, this would be your midline in the end. And we never could even get halfway up there before prices pushed on lower. So there was definitely a downward bias today. And this is how I saw it. So let's back out. We'll go through the trades and then we'll wrap this day up. It's quite a few early on. This one came right at 7. You can see we were working lower. There's the overnight lows were down here. We had some support there, so it was no surprise that we bounced there. But you know, there's a good chance we're still going lower at this point. Regardless, we're probably going to try to make a retest of the low here. And notice your new low. There's actually a first entry and a second entry right here, but we're not back to the EMA yet. And this is where that support was. This looks more like a double bottom to me. So then you get two legs up. So I treated this as the second entry. And look at, that's a very nice signal bar. Technically, it didn't break till below this bar. So and normally I'd tell you not to use uh, an inside bar, but really this broke higher and turned down. So you could have entered this one on the engulfing bar, because there's clearly two legs up there. Hopefully you can see that with it. And this is a big bearish bar. So and you can see once it broke lower here how quick it moved down. Um, I like entering on the engulfing bar. I'm not as crazy about entering on this inside bar, but that's such a nice signal bar. If it breaks lower, we're probably going lower. So if you did play it that way, I'm not crazy about playing it using this as your entry below that bar. I probably would have still had it here and waited to see how this bar was going to play out. And so I'm just not sure how I feel about that inside bar. But this is, if you played the engulfing bar, you would have been in it, would have played out nicely. Um, if it would have broke below this bar, I've got no problem using this for a signal bar. I'm just a little hesitant to point that one out because it's really against the rules. But that's such a great second entry with such a bearish bar that the odds are we're going lower. So anyway, if you didn't like that trade, if you wait a few minutes later, you get a first entry, second entry. And this is congested too, so when it breaks higher and turns down. But when it turned back up there, I looked at this like this channel working up here. You can clearly see that, and it looks like we got a break and a couple of legs up. But at this point, I was still playing the downtrend, and I think you're safe with that bar because this just looks like congestion and a failed breakout. So as long as you got room before you get back to these lows, let me go ahead and put it on there since I don't have it on there. You can clearly see that congestion. We break out. and we ended up bouncing and going higher. I drew this channel on there. It doesn't really help you, this trend line or whatever. I mean, you could maybe even drop it down a little bit like so. But this is just more sideways than anything. So, and then it doesn't really fit up here. I guess you could drag it on up. But anyway, you still get a close outside, move to a new couple of legs up to a new high, and then you just make a lower high here right at the midline. I like going short there, thinking we're coming back down. We still haven't made a new low yet. And then you make a second entry short right here. This one's a little bit congested, but I still like it. There's an overall downward bias here, and no matter what, you got a short-term trend here. You might could argue there's a little bit of a break right there and a new low, but it's not a very convincing break, and you could even draw it like that, and it actually fits better like that. So there's your break. Second entry short. It actually makes two larger legs up. So you could actually look at this as a bigger picture second entry right here. But again, there's resistance across there. It fails right into the midline and turns back down. I like both of those. And we finally run on down two legs, and we still don't get that new low. You get another second entry here, but that signal bar is too bullish. And we finally make a new low here just by a tick or so. And it looks like we're going to bounce out of there, but you don't really know. I like this one just as a failed break lower below all that support across there. It's aggressive, and most traders are probably better off to leave that alone. But being that far away from the EMA and a failed break lower, you're probably coming back to the EMA. And maybe a lot of times these are important lows, and they run and go all the way to the other side of the channel or range. And so I thought maybe that would happen there, but it doesn't. Then you're just you get a break, new high, and then you're just chopping along again. Unfortunately, you don't get a setup here. This is too bullish. This is too big. Not enough room to scalp out now. It's pretty obvious what's going on here. But finally, notice that new high, and you try to go higher once, and then you break loose, and you come back, and you test it from the inside, or from the underside of the EMA and the range right there. If it breaks lower, we're probably going to drop on down. I like that one. But if you didn't like that one, it's a little bit aggressive because it looks a little congestive, and a lot of times you want to see it test that twice. But just a few minutes later, you get a second entry short with a nice signal bar right off that trend line. That's the better entry. It actually gives you another second entry here, but it's not a very good signal bar, and it's congested by the time it triggers. But if you wait, it tries to go higher again, and now you've made that high. You try to go higher once, and then twice, and look how bearish that bar is. The key is you got to have enough room to get out before here, because it could bounce there again. So you may have to let that break lower first and drop a limit order a couple of ticks higher. And you could have got filled a couple of ticks higher on that one, I know. And just make sure you got room to get out. Okay, I had a little interruption. I think we were talking about this trade. Just make sure you got enough room. That's the reason it's green. It's a little bit aggressive. So you might have looked at this as a failure right here too, but it's just too congestive right there, right at those lows. It's too big a chance it breaks lower and turns up. I wouldn't take that trade. And then we're just too far away from the EMA on anything else down through here. There is a second entry short there, and you could argue for that one to be green as well. The problem is you already made your measured move, and it really just looks like one leg up from right there, even though the count is truly a second entry and it's a little congestive. I'll mark it anyway. I'm not crazy about that trade. We're running up here. No reason to look for a short yet. You just can't go long in this. You might have taken a short right here. You might try to say that, hey, that's a little failed break higher. But we're looking for a new high here, and it's just too big a chance that prices find another trend and make a second leg up like this one. So I don't like going short there. By the time you get another chance to enter, it's down here. Not a good setup. And then we're back down at the lows again. Nothing that I'd want to go long. There's a higher low, but again, congestive right into the EMA. But finally, you break lower, and when it breaks higher here, you're above the EMA. So you're probably going to head back to the highs here. You would think that's where you're going. It doesn't quite make it, but that's an easy scalp. Still a good setup. I marked it green because it didn't set up completely above the EMA, so it's not perfect. But there's some reasons. I mean, you would assume we're going back to the highs here. So uh, I think this actually broke higher, turned down, and then turned back up. So, but you couldn't enter until it made this swing lower. So the entry would be one tick above this red bar, just to clarify that. And then of course we're just chopping along here, but we do try to go higher once, twice. So there's like a triple test there. As long as you got room again to get out here, you could take a short right there. And then the bottom just drops out here. I don't think you want to take a short right here, even though you could look at that as a failure. That's just too sideways, too congestive. We drop down, and then finally we try to go higher. I mean, this looks like a double top here. So you try to go higher once and then twice. So when it does break lower right there, you've got that pullback to the EMA. I like entering right there. You just about had to enter on a stop there. Even though there's not a lot of room to those lows, this is going to trap people right here. And there's actually a triple test. Notice that we try to go higher once, twice, three times. Look how bearish that is. I like that trade. There's actually a new high again in the first entry, second entry. I didn't mark this one. It's getting so late in the day, but technically, I like that trade right there. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it green, but I like that trade because you got a new high. You try to go higher once, twice. Look how bearish that is. Boom. I mean, I'd really like to see a second entry here that comes all the way back to the EMA, but that's close enough. It really looks a little like a repeat pattern of this as well. So, and then we just kind of chop sideways back into the 3 o'clock hour, and that was pretty much it for the day. So all in all, the morning was pretty good with this downward stuff here. You would think there might be an upward bias today because we traded up into this, but it looks like it's going to be a range day. And you got to look where we're at too. We're between this 4420 and 4400 here. And again, I talked about this. We're probably going to test both sides of that a few times before prices figure out what they're going to do. Those century marks, 4100, 4200, 4300, 4400, and that's 4400 right there. All those century marks are usually going to be very emotional areas that are going to be tested a few times. Very rarely you just push through one of those areas and keep going. Generally, you're going to bounce around it on both sides for a little while before prices get a new direction, or either selling off or catching up or whatever. So anyway, that's what I saw today. But I'm not going to beat around the bush with this. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.